Good morning and welcome to Caregivers in the Kitchen with AARP Alabama and Samford University. I'm Ann Hales with AARP, and joining me today are Chef Clara Darling and Mim Gaines, who are also registered dietitians with Samford. Good morning.
Hello, thanks for having us, Ann.
Oh, it's good to be here again. I'm looking forward to this session. Today, this session is designed for caregivers who are looking for relatively easy to prepare, nutritious meals that they can serve to people they're caring for, themselves, or their own families. These recipes, though, are good for anybody. Anybody can do this and prepare these, and they're good for your families. So I hope that you enjoy the menu that we have in store for you today. So if you have any questions during this session, please put them in the chat. Mim will be watching that in the chat, and she will be relaying your questions to Chef Clara. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to tell us about the spring menu that we have going on, and then take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So today we're going to be making salmon cakes, resting on a spring farro salad. We'll have lots of fresh vegetables and colors in that. And then we'll finish it up with a spiced up store-bought pound cake. How to take a dessert that's really easy and just bump up the nutrition a little bit without losing any of the interest. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is start working on my salmon cakes. If you were making this, I would recommend starting the farro first. I happen to have already cooked my farro here. It doesn't take that long, but it is about a 30 to 45 minute just cook time. So it's nice to kind of have that already out of the way. And I'll talk about that a little more when we get into the salad. But other than that, the salmon cakes like to sit for a little bit before you actually cook them to help absorb all the liquid. So we're going to go ahead and get started on that. There's a couple knife skills we'll go over. So one is going to be a bell pepper. I like to use red bell pepper. It's very bright. It gives a lot of color. The flavor is really nice. Lots of good nutrients in it. So for this, we only need a 1/4 cup. We don't need the whole thing. So I will show you how to break down the whole thing, and then you can save the rest for another recipe if you need it. So what I like to do when I'm holding these is I hold it straight up, and I like to cut around the inside. So there's membranes on the inside that hold the seeds and then hold the seeds to the skin. So all you really need to do is just separate the outside skins from all that membrane space. And what I do for that is I take my knife and I cut. The first cut's kind of a guess. It's about halfway in between the stem and the outside of that skin. And then I can look in, and now I can see where that membrane is. And when I say membrane, it's also known as the pith. It's the white part. It's kind of bitter on the inside. So all I did was just shave that off. So you see the membrane on the inside and then the skin on the outside. And just so I have this ready for whatever next recipe I'm going to do, I'll do the whole thing. So I keep turning the bell pepper towards me and keep doing that same cut, just cutting right along the membrane. So I end up with all these nice panels, and then this whole piece in the center, I can just toss that away. I'm not having to scrape seeds off my cutting board. It's all very easy. So I only need about a 1/4 cup for this particular recipe. So that's going to be about a 1/4 of this pepper. So when I go to dice this, you can do it skin up or skin down. I do a lot of times recommend doing skin down just because at home, not everyone has the sharpest knife. If you have a really, of course, I would hope everyone has sharp knives, but sometimes they get dull, things happen. If you put the skin side down, there's a little more traction with the knife and the skin, and it makes it easier to cut, and you're not sitting here sawing, trying to break through that skin. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut in these little panels, and you'll notice, in case y'all weren't here for the last one, I'll go over. When I hold my knife, I make sure to take my thumb and forefinger and hold it just above that handle there. It actually gives me a lot more stability. And then when I use my other hand, I do what we call the claw. So I'm trying to keep my fingers out of the way. So rather than having my fingers here where I could cut them off, I'm making sure that they're nice and tucked under, so I can guide my knife, but without risking cutting anything off. And then I'll do some nice little strips probably about a 1/4 inch thick, all the way down the bell pepper. And once I've got that, I'll just turn this whole section of strips sideways, and then I'm going to do the exact same size cut the other way, and that is going to yield me these really nice small dices. You don't want them too big of pieces because it'll make it difficult for the salmon cakes to stick together. So trying to get them small is good. If you cut it at first and they're a little bit big, that's okay. You just take the knife and run it over a couple times until you get it the size that you want. Not a big deal.
And while Clara is cutting that, I just want to interrupt just a second and remind you that red bell pepper are full of vitamin C. And that is one of the nutrients that you may hear us talk about all through the program, because vitamin C is so important for our older adult population. That red bell pepper, bell peppers come in green, yellow, orange. They all have great vitamin C and are all great antioxidants. So Clara, is there a reason you chose the red one?
Mainly because of the flavor and the color. All the bell peppers have really great nutrients in it, but this, for the spring menu, I love to just embrace all the bright colors of spring, all the greens and the reds and the pinks. So you'll see a lot of that over here. Fresh herbs. This is just the time of season where everything's coming to life. And I think just the bright red kind of exemplifies that and goes with the green and yellow and other ingredients that are in it. And so, yeah, now I'm going to move into our red onion. So again, I only need a 1/4 cup of this, which will be about a 1/4 of the onion, give or take. So I cut the onion in half from root to stem. So now I have a nice flat surface. Whenever I'm cutting, I try to have a flat surface as much as possible. It's a safer, easier way to cut. And then I just peel off the papery outside. So to dice this, what I'm going to do is I'll take my knife and I actually leave the root end on for this, and I will show you why. So I face it towards me, and I'm just going to kind of go along these lines that are naturally in the onion with my knife, and I cut almost to the root end, but not all the way through. All right, still trying to keep those cuts pretty small, about a 1/4 inch, the same size as the bell pepper. So I follow this all the way around. There's a couple different ways to cut an onion, but this is my favorite. So now I have an onion that's got all these basically slices in it, but it's still held together. So I'm not chasing around my onion around the cutting board, and I can turn this whole thing sideways again. And just like the bell pepper, do that same size cut going down. And because of the natural layers that are in the onion, they will fall apart into these nice small dices. So again, nice pieces that will mix in well with our salmon. I'm only going to do about half of this onion because I only need a 1/4 of a cup. And then I can save this for another recipe later on. Again, if they were a little too big, just run your knife over it, no problem. And I have to the side here my salmon. So I had already put in 2 cans of salmon, to start 2 full 14-ounce cans. And I did take out some of the bones to show you. So this is especially important if you are a caregiver for someone who might have dysphagia or swallowing difficulties. So most people are totally capable of eating the bones that come in canned salmon. When they pressurize and cook it, it makes them very soft and very fragile, but they are still bones, and they can still be a choking hazard for some individuals. So if that's a concern for you, it's really quite simple. I don't know if you can see these. So they put a whole salmon in the can. And so when you take it out of the can, you can just separate it, pull it in half, and you'll see a whole vertebrae down the center there. So you can just pull that out all in one piece. And then you can also go through and pick out some of the pin bones as well. So I already have that done here, and I've mashed it up with a fork to get it into smaller pieces because it does come in big chunks. And so now I'm just adding the rest of my ingredients. So I've already got my bell pepper in there. I'm going to add my onion in. And then next we'll do the garlic. This is garlic season as well, so you can get some nice fresh garlic. All right. So first thing I'm going to do for this is I need to get off the papery skin. So the easiest way I find to do that is just to take the back of my knife, or you can use another flat object as well, and just use the heel of my hand and crush it just a little bit. And what that's going to do is help release some of the oils, but it will also release the garlic from the papery skin. It will just fall right off. And then you can just toss that away. It can be kind of difficult to peel garlic if you're trying to do it with your fingers. So giving it that little crush motion first makes it a lot easier. So I'll get rid of the paper. And then for this, we're going to mince it. So what I like to do, I'll cut off the little rough ends if they look old. All right. And then I actually like to crush my garlic as part of the mincing process. It really helps release the oils. It gets more flavor out of it and kind of makes it easier, in my opinion. So I do the same thing I just did. I put some pressure on it and crush it. And what that's going to do is break it into pieces. I don't know if you can see the shine on my knife, but it actually does release a lot more oil than if you just cut into it. And that's where all that good flavor is. So I'm going to do that with both of these. And then from there, I'm just going to do a rocking chop over it. So take my knife, run it over a few times, just trying to get into small pieces. It does not have to be perfect. All right. And then once I've got those into nice small pieces, you will see I call this a bench scraper next to my cutting board. It helps me prevent from dulling my knife quickly. If I'm constantly scraping my knife on the cutting board, it will actually dull it and disalign the blade. So I like to keep something close by just to help that I don't have to sharpen my knife as much. Okay, the last thing we're going to cut for this is some fresh dill. This is one of my favorite herbs. It's so delicate. It's so fragrant. It definitely just makes you think of spring. This is the time for it, although it grows pretty well all year round, so it's fairly easy to find. But it has these long little tendrils in it. If you've ever seen fennel, it looks very similar. And so a couple herbs, this one and cilantro in particular, have really tender stems, so you don't have to sit here and pick off all the individual leaves. That takes all day. Some other herbs might have harder stems. It's necessary, but for these, I just take it right below where the leaves stop. Just twist it off. So there's a little bit of stems left on there, but they're so tender and flavorful, you're not going to notice them. So we need about 3 tablespoons of this. So I'm just going to go through and roughly pick off some of this. All right, let's say that's about 3 tablespoons. So this recipe really utilizes the combination of dill and lemon, which is a very classic pairing and goes excellent with seafood, as do capers, which are in this recipe. So an extra benefit of all these is that you can decrease the amount of salt you need to use in it. So fresh herbs and spices brighten up dishes, make it more interesting, and decrease the need for salt for flavor. And then also we have capers that we're going to add in a minute that are naturally salty because they're in a brine. So when you use those, you'll use a little bit less salt. They do contain sodium and salt. So you just want to make sure to balance that with additional salt. So for the dill, I'm just placing it on, and I'm just going in one smooth motion, dicing these. Again, you can do the rocking back and forth motion if that's what's more comfortable for you. This is a little bit faster for me, so I do it this way. Yep. So, and they're such light little pieces, they really fall apart. That's all you need to do. So I will add that into the salmon mixture here. Okay, so I did go ahead and rough chop some capers. All you do is drain those, put them on your cutting board, rock over them a couple times. There's not a special cut for it. You're just trying to break it up into slightly smaller pieces so that it mixes in better. All right, so I'm going to add in those capers there. It's about 2 tablespoons. I'm going to add in about a 1/4 cup of panko. So this is just, it's breadcrumbs, but it has a specific texture to it. It's very crunchy. It's very light. And actually decrease the amount of panko in this for it to make it more of a protein-forward dish. A lot of times when we make salmon cakes or eat crab cakes, it saves a lot of money and adds some extra flavor to it when you can use breadcrumbs. But I like to decrease that and increase the flavor more with herbs and vegetables. So there's a 1/4 cup of that in there. I've got 2 eggs. That will just help as our binder, make sure that the salmon sticks together. Got a little bit of salt and pepper. And then the last thing I'll do is a zest and juice of fresh lemon. So I really prefer fresh lemon over store-bought. You can get the zest, which has the majority of the flavor in it, and that fresh citrus juice is going to have more vitamin C, or more natural vitamin C, and more flavor to it than what you can get in a bottle. So I highly recommend using that. And the tool I love maybe most in the kitchen is a zester. So there's a few different companies you can get it from, but these are made specifically for zesting. So they work so much better than trying to use a box grater or anything like that. And all I can do for this, I can do it straight over my bowl. So I'm going to take it and just taking off the very outer layer, that yellow of the lemon. I don't want to go too far down. It will start to get bitter underneath that. So just that top layer. And you'll notice I do it over the bowl because you actually, when you zest lemon, you lose some of the oil. It spritzes off as you do it. So if you do it towards the bowl, you're going to save just that little bit of extra flavor and oil. All right, and then I need just a tablespoon of lemon juice to give it some acidity. And you'll notice all 3 of the recipes we're making today really use acidity as a balance component. So when you're cooking, you want your food to be interesting, but you don't want it to be have too much sodium in it. And a lot of times if it's lackluster in flavor, we use salt as to cope with it. But acid really helps open up the taste buds and brings out the natural salt and flavor in foods. So adding just a little bit of lemon juice or vinegar really helps brighten up a dish, especially for these spring flavors. So a tablespoon of lemon juice is about a half a lemon. So I'm just going to put that in there.
As Clara is beginning to stir all the ingredients together, I just want to remind us about the benefits of salmon. We chose salmon because it's such a wonderful fish to be able to give us so many omega-3 fatty acids. It's a great fat source of the healthy fat that we need. But in addition to that, as Clara was talking about the bones in the salmon, if you do use the bones, if swallowing or chewing is not a problem, then those bones are actually going to give you some calcium in this dish. So you're not only getting the vitamin C and the protein and the calcium if you're using the bones, but salmon has a lot of minerals in it and some of the trace minerals like selenium that we don't hear a lot about, but selenium is really important to help those antioxidants work. So this easy to chew, easy to swallow protein is really important for our older Americans as we try to get more protein in their body.
Yes, thank you. All right, so we've got that. You may have noticed I put on a glove, but you can do it with as long as you wash your hands, do it with your bare hands. It helps to just kind of get in the salmon and mix it up really well with your hands. It helps it stick together. It does like to sit for at least 10 to 15 minutes just to absorb the eggs and let the panko kind of absorb some of the liquid, and it'll hold together better. So while that's resting, we're going to move on to the farro salad. Well, farro is one of my favorite grains. It's so flavorful. It has a wonderful chewy texture to it. It's really easy to eat, and it's a whole grain, so we get all the benefits that come along with that. Our healthy fats, our fiber, our slow digesting carbohydrates, which really help us keep our sustained energy. So as I mentioned earlier, I did go ahead and cook my farro, but I'll show you what it looks like raw. So it looks, if you've ever seen wheat berry or barley, it looks very similar. So it's just a dark grain. You may notice on the recipe that it says pearled or semi-pearled farro. So most farro that you see in the store is going to be pearled. You really kind of have to look for a whole grain farro, but I like to put it in there just so that you know if you see both of them. Whole grain farro has a little bit extra of the outside skin on it. So semi-pearled farro, it has all 3 components. It has the outside shell where all the fiber is kept within the grain, but they take off about half of it just to quicken the cooking process. If you just use whole grain farro, you tend to have to soak it overnight. It'll cook for 45 minutes to an hour. It's more like working with dried beans, and it's wonderful. I love using it at home, but if you're trying to make something quick for tonight, having that semi-pearled farro, you get almost all the same nutritional benefits, just slightly less fiber, and it'll cut back on your time by a lot. So that's what we're using for this recipe. And then once you cook it, it will increase in size about by 2 to 3 times. Get these nice fluffy grains. And we'll make a nice vinaigrette, add it on there. The grains will soak it up and just add a lot of extra flavor to it. So there's not a lot of extra cooking that goes into this recipe, but I did want to talk about what's called blanching. So blanching is a wonderful cooking technique that really, it means to very briefly cook something in hot boiling water and then to immediately cool it down. Typically we do that with an ice bath. You can also lay it out on like a baking sheet and put it in the refrigerator to cool it down quickly. But what this does, it's going to bring out the natural, really beautiful colors, especially for green vegetables, the chlorophyll that's in that. It's going to just brighten it up and make it so much more attractive. And you can also kind of enhance a little bit of flavor. I put just a touch of salt in the water. It helps bring out that natural flavor. But it will also make it so you don't overcook it and we can preserve all of the nutrients. Sometimes if we cook vegetables for too long, we lose some of the great vitamins that are in that to begin with. So this allows you to get the benefits of cooking, but preserve those nutrients at the same time. So the first thing that we'll do, I have a cup of fresh spring peas here, bought just from the store. And so what I'm going to do, if you look over at my stove, I don't know if we can pull up my stove view or if you can see it, but I have a pot of boiling water over here. And this is a process. When you go to do this, you want to make sure you have everything ready. So I have my boiling water. I have an ice bath ready to go. That's right to the side here. So what I mean by ice bath, I have a bowl of ice and water, and I have a colander right in it so that when I put the peas in it, I can take them out without it mixing in with the ice. So I've got that. I've got a slotted spoon to help me dig it out because this is a very fast process. So I've got my 1 cup of peas here. I'm going to turn up my water. There we go. You do want to make sure that it's boiling. So I'm going to dump those in there. And for peas, it's really about 1 to 2 minutes, no more than that. Asparagus, depending on the size, you might want to do 2 to 3 minutes. Ours are pretty medium size. So for that, probably do about 2.5 minutes. If they're really, really thin, you might just want to do them for a minute. But really all you're looking for is just the color to start to come out. So I'm mixing those around. All right, I'll give it maybe 1 more minute on that. So while that's going, I'll go ahead and show you the asparagus. Asparagus is really easy to cut. So I have this long piece here. And if you want to find just the natural break, that's what we call it. You just push it from both ends and it'll break where it's naturally most tender. It's not necessary. You can just take the whole bunch of them and then cut them about 1/3 of the way up. It will kind of depend based on the asparagus, which is where breaking comes in handy to see where that natural break would be. And then all you have is the nice tender tops. All right. I know I'm going back and forth over here, but my peas have been in there about 1.5 minutes. So I'm kind of looking at them and you can see they're getting a little bit more color to them. It's a nice brightness. So I'm going to move my ice bath over here. And if I was just doing these, I could definitely strain all these right into the sink. But because I am going to do my asparagus next, I'm going to scoop out these as best I can with my slotted spoon so then I can go right back in that water with the asparagus. I may leave a few in there, but it's not the end of the world. You could also, a really great technique is to, if you have a strainer or colander that will fit in the pot, you can actually put that in there, and that way when you go to pick these peas out, all you have to do is pick up the whole colander and put it into the ice bath. It's a great trick as well. It just depends on what you have to work with in your kitchen. Okay, so I've got my peas out. Now they're cooling down. They only need to cool down for about 30 seconds to a minute, just enough to stop that cooking process. They look beautiful, nice and bright green. So they've got really nice color to them now. So while those are in there, I'll go ahead and finish cutting these asparagus and put those right into that same water, making sure that my water was able to come back up to a boil. All right, so for these, we're just cutting them into kind of bite-sized pieces. So whatever that means for you. I'll probably cut these into about 4 pieces, but if you're with someone who needs smaller pieces to chew, you can definitely cut these smaller. But I'm just going to go through and make about 4 cuts down the side. And now I have these nice little bite-sized pieces. All right, and then put that straight into that same water and give it a couple minutes to cook. So once you get your water boiling, this is a very fast process. And I can go ahead. So I'm going to strain out my peas. They're nice and cool, and I add them right to my farro. We're just going to build this whole salad right in the bowl. No need to make extra dishes, right? Now I've got my ice bath ready to take my asparagus once it's ready.
While Clara's waiting on that asparagus to get the pretty green that she's talking about, I just want to remind you that asparagus is a great source for vitamin K. We think of vitamin K as the K for clotting, blood clotting. So especially when older Americans, when they bump and they bruise so easily because their veins are getting weaker, we find that asparagus is a very important food to include. She's using a lot of the great colors in this farro salad. And farro, as she mentioned, is a wonderful old grain, as we would call it, an ancient grain, which means that it is wonderful for not only protein, but a lot of fiber as well. But as she's getting that asparagus ready, you'll notice that we're not worried about the vitamin K coming out in the water. It'll stay in that asparagus. And she's not cooking those English pea or green peas very long, so they're still going to be a great source of vitamin C as well. Again, vitamin C, vitamin K, protein, as well as B vitamins, very important to watch for your older American diet. And so far, the salmon has been a great vitamin source for vitamin B12, as is this salad will be.
Absolutely, thank you. And yeah, to help make up for some of that vitamin C loss that we may lose from things like this, we've got lemon in 2 of the recipes, so that fresh lemon juice, and also some strawberries we're going to use at the end. So there's lots of extra sources. So we're making sure to include a plethora of our nutrients. So if you can see, I have these nice bright green asparagus. So they're a little more tender. They'll get rid of any remaining bitterness that might be in them and just brighten them up, and really just makes the dish very attractive. So I'm just straining those out, adding them right in. So hopefully you can see, these are just really, really bright green now. All right, so we are done with our water and our ice bath. All right, so the last couple things for this salad, again, going along with that spring theme. So radishes are a really easy thing to grow in spring. They come up in about a month to 6 weeks. And this is the perfect time to start picking them. They have that beautiful pink skin on them, or these do anyway. And they kind of give a little spiciness to the dish, a little crunch. So it's nice. So for these, it just says to thinly slice. You can do rounds, or if you have a mandolin or slicer, that might be nice. But if you're doing it with a knife, sometimes I find it's easier to cut it in half first, again, to get that flat side on the cutting board, and do more like half moon rounds in there. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to take off just the little bitty tail that's on it and the stem. And I'm going to put the flat side down from where that stem was, cut it straight in half. And I can put that on my cutting board, the bigger side now. And that allows me to have more control to go through and thinly slice these. And these can be as thick or thin as you like. I like them pretty thin, because they do have a pretty strong flavor. They can be pretty spicy. So I just like to have little bursts of it. And this calls for a 1/4 cup. It's probably about 4 of these radishes. So I will just chop those and put them in there real quick. And then we're going to move on to our nice fresh herbs. So as we mentioned, herbs, in addition to helping decrease the need for salt and interest in the dish, they are really great sources of phytonutrients. And so getting a little extra health kick in there as well. I chose mint and chives because these are typically the first two to come up. They're actually already going pretty well in our garden right now that we have here at Samford. I'm just going through these. And if you don't have chives, you can certainly use green onions or spring onions or any other kind of onions you have. All right, so I've got about a quarter cup of radish here. So you can already see all the bright colors are coming together in this salad. Okay, so for these herbs, I like to show how to cut these to make it a little easier. So here's my trick for chives if you ever want to cut them. Green onions are a little bigger, a little sturdier. You can typically just hold those, but these are really flimsy and roll around. So I like to take a damp paper towel and I just roll them together, and it's going to help them stay together as I go to slice them. So I get those nice pretty rounds and they're all even and not broken up. And so that way, now that these are together, I can just go with my knife. You do want to have a pretty sharp knife for this to make sure that you've cut through all of them. But they're going to have these beautiful decorative little rounds. I'll have bursts of very, very mild onion flavor coming out. So as I move down, I can pull more of the chives out of the paper towel and just thin slice those. All right. And then our next herb is the mint. So the fancy term for how we're going to cut the mint is called a chiffonade. That's not really important, but I think it's fun to say. So for that, we're basically going to cut it into very thin strips, but it helps to not bruise the mint. Cutting it this way keeps it nice and whole pieces. So I'm actually going to do it. I think I can do it with this whole stack of mint here. So I have already picked off the leaves of mint individually, and I have stacked them on top of each other. So just taking the leaves and stack them all in facing order. And then, so I have them here, and I take them from the long end, and I just roll them. Roll them all together so they're a little tube. I'm going to hold them just like that. And I'm going to take my knife and just do very thin slices. If you just stack them, you can cut them that way, but rolling them, having extra surface or height to it helps with that knife being able to cut all the way down. So just cutting thin little strips. I like having the decorative strips. If you don't like having that large of pieces, you can take your knife again and just cut it to where you want. This is very manageable. You can alter it to where you want it to be. Okay, so the last thing that, other than the vinaigrette, we're going to add a little bit of fresh arugula. So this just, again, helps add a little bit of extra of those non-starchy vegetables. We always like to have some dark leafy greens in our meal, or at least throughout the day as much as we can. They're really a powerhouse of nutrients. And arugula also has really interesting, like, spicy flavor to it. So it helps add some intrigue to the dish. So we'll add about 2 cups of that. You can add more or less based on what you want with this. All right, so just mix that in, and then we're going to make our nice vinaigrette to pour on top. If you wanted to make this ahead of time, grain salads do really well to be dressed ahead of time because they can soak up that vinaigrette. But I might recommend waiting on the arugula and adding that in just before you serve it so it doesn't wilt down. But all the rest of these ingredients will hold great. You could just keep it in the fridge with the vinaigrette days. Okay, so for our very quick vinaigrette, I have some red wine vinegar. This is one of my favorite go-to vinaigrettes. I do this all the time for green salads, grain salads. I'll even put it on some grilled fish. It's just a really great balance of salty, spicy, sweet, acid, all the great flavors. So for a vinaigrette, we always start with a little bit of vinegar or some sort of acid. So this is going to give it that brightness. And to help what we call emulsify the vinegar with the oil, meaning that they will stay together. It will help spread the flavor more on your tongue. Like when you buy dressing at the store and it's one consistent product, it's because it's been emulsified. So to do that at home, we have some ingredients we can use that help naturally keep that process going. So if you just added oil and vinegar, they're going to have a tendency to break apart and separate. So if you want them to stay together, my go-to ingredients, they happen to go really well together, are garlic, Dijon mustard, and honey. So all three of these are natural emulsifiers. I mean, they help it stay together, but they also have really great contrasting flavors. So we get salt and spice from the Dijon. We can get real sweetness from the lemon or from the honey. And then we can get some spicy savoriness from the garlic. So all three of these I'm going to add in here. Just mix them really well. I like to use a whisk. It'll help this process go quickly. So mix those really well together. It'll have you a little cloudy base. And then I'm very slowly, while I'm whisking, just going to whisk in this olive oil. So I have about a quarter cup of olive oil here. And some people like more or less olive oil. That's definitely a personal preference, whether you like equal parts or 1-3 or 1-4. And so as it gets incorporated, I'll add a little bit more and a little bit more. But I want to make sure that it's all really well whisked. If I add it all at once and then try to whisk it, you're going to have a hard time getting it to come together. It's going to have a tendency to separate.
Clara, we have a question. Can you substitute another green for arugula?
Oh, absolutely. Really, any lettuce green you want in this. I mean, even if you do romaine or Bibb lettuce or mixed greens, what else would be good? Anything that's pretty tender. I mean, even like baby kale, anything that's a salad green that you don't need to cook or massage or anything will go great in this.
And we have another one.
Yeah, some people don't really love arugula
later
because it is kind of spicy and can be bitter, but you can definitely substitute. All right, the last thing I'm going to do here is add in the salt and pepper. Just a little bit there. All right, so now I have it's very thick. It's almost the consistency of egg yolks, I would say, in that. And so we are using extra virgin olive oil here. This is going to help boost our extra omega-3s, that we're going to get some really nice healthy fats, which we always want to be including. All right, so I'm just going to take this and pour it lightly all over this salad. Toss that pretty well. We'll just sit it to the side and let all those flavors meld while we finish up. And you know what, just to make sure, for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my back stove here, make sure I get my pan warming up so I can show you how to cook those salmon cakes. Oh, this smells so good.
And while Clara is stirring that, just thinking about what she said about the herbs, Samford does have a small herb garden right out on our deck. And it's an easy thing that anyone could do. In fact, now on my deck, I have an herb garden. The wonderful thing about chives and mint that she's talking about is that you plant it once and it comes back every year.
Yes.
It's a great herb to plant. But we call them pot gardens or container gardens. I've even heard them called trash can gardens because you're using small containers. And I'm talking about like a bathroom trash can, not a kitchen trash can. But any small container that you have, you don't have to have a special pot to put the herbs in. They're easy to grow and always fresh and ready for you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I've got my pan heating up back here. It's getting pretty warm. So I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil to this. You can use any kind of cooking oil. Some people prefer to use a higher smoke point cooking oil for this. You could use avocado oil or canola oil. I keep it at a pretty low medium temperature, and I like that olive flavor in this dish, so I'm going to use olive oil for it as well. And it prevents me from having to buy multiple oils. So I'm just swishing it around. making sure that I coat the pan. You don't want it to be smoky, you don't want it to be too hot, but you do want it to be hot before you add the salmon in. If you add it to a cold pan, it's going to have a tendency to stick. And you really want to get a sear. You want to get that browning on the bottom. And so you need heat in order for that to happen. It's not going to happen at a low temperature, and the moisture in the salmon cakes will interfere. So just so I don't have to keep washing my hands, I'm going to add gloves because these are nice to be able to kind of form them with your hands. I like to use about 1/3 of a cup measuring cup. Turn this down. I have my salmon mixture here to the side. And so, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing over here, but I guess I can turn around this way. 1/3 of a cup, and I'm kind of pressing it in there so that it really takes the shape that I want. So when I take it out, it's pretty much already a patty. I might just push down on a little bit, making sure that it's secure and holding together. And then I have that nice sear or that sound, right? It's hot enough, but not too hot. It's what we're going for. And you can always adjust the heat. And if you like them smaller, you could do these at maybe do a 1/4 cup instead. I like to have nice, pretty thick ones. I think they look really nice on the plate. All right. And I'm just going to let those cook for about 2 to 3 minutes per side. You really just want to get nice and brown and cooked through. So this is why you do want to keep the temperature kind of low medium. If it's too high, you'll get that color before the center cooks. So you want to make sure that you're able to cook it all the way through and get that color. So medium low is good for that. So I'm going to let that just go in the back there. And then while that's cooking, we'll just talk about the dessert. This is going to be our last thing today. So we have some nice store-bought pound cake. I just got it from a local grocery store here. So nothing fancy. I'm not trying to make all this at home. But what I do want to show you is just how to take that and spice it up, right? How to add a little more flavor to it, but also increase the nutrients in it. So since it is spring, strawberries are coming in to full bloom right now. We have a bunch going on our garden right now. We're very excited. So what I'm going to do, I'll just show you how I cut these. Just a basic quarter. So I cut off the stem. I tend to hold the leaves so I can move those out of the way. Just cut them off. Again, now I have a flat surface. Put the flat surface down, and I'm going to cut it once in half, turn it, and once in half again, so you have those nice quarters. It's a pretty common cut. You may have done that before. So it don't take too long. These I have rinsed all these off. And so to brighten this up, so it's not just strawberries. You may have had, strawberry shortcake where they have that nice strawberry liquid with it that we love. But to do that, you have to soak it in a lot of processed sugar. So we're going to try to do that without so much of the sugar, but still get that nice juiciness that can soak into the cake, make it nice and moist. So how we're going to do that is use lemon zest and juice again, 2 of my favorite ingredients. So that's going to brighten it up. And then I'm going to add just a touch of honey to it to help add that extra sweetness and draw out some of that liquid so we do get that strawberry juice that we're looking for. All right. So as I'm talking, I'm just going to be coming over here. I smell my salmon cakes. They smell delicious. Yeah, they're almost there. I think they need about another minute. They have a light browning on the bottom. Sorry, I keep going back and forth, Anne. All right. So for this, this is lemon zest and juice, just like I did earlier, already done. So I'm going to pour that on there. And then I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of honey to 2 pounds of strawberries. Mix that in really well. And if you can do this ahead of time and let it sit maybe half an hour, it'll really help get those juices to come out. By the way, it's already getting a nice glistening look to it. Makes them look really nice and fresh. And then my secret ingredient to this is just a tiny bit of cardamom. So cardamom is a really strong spice. You often will see it in some Indian cuisines. So it does not take much. It's just a pinch. So I'm just going to do a little dash of it, but it's a really interesting flavor and it goes so well with desserts. It'll leave your guests wondering, oh, what is that? It's not cinnamon, but it's something else. And it goes really great with strawberries and lemon. So I'm going to put that in there and let that go. I think it's about time to turn our salmon cakes. I can see some color on the bottom. So I'm going back to my stove to check on these.
While Clara is checking on those salmon patties, I want you to please think about what she has cooked today. And think about the new phrase that you hear so much, food is medicine. Today we've been talking to you about the nutrients in the food, the nutrients that are so important for our older Americans as well as any person. But if you'll think about what she's cooked, you'll see a lot of different colors. So even if you don't remember whether it has vitamin K or C or A, just know to eat the rainbow is the way that we teach people to eat all the different antioxidants and phytochemicals that you need. The different colors represent different nutrients. And today, Chef Clara has done a great job with a lot of different colors so we can eat the rainbow.
Yes, thank you. So we're almost done over here. I'm going to give that just a couple more minutes to finish up. So while that's going, I'll just go ahead and plate the dessert and we'll have that out of the way. So I've got my fresh slice of pound cake here. And all I'm going to do for this, so a lot of times for pound cake, people, and myself included, might like to add a little whipped cream or fresh ice cream to it, which of course is delicious, but we're trying to limit some of that extra fat and extra sugar. So what I like to use is just some slightly sweetened Greek yogurt. This is actually called a less sugar Greek yogurt. So it is sweetened. It's not tart or bitter. And it's got some vanilla and cinnamon in it. I bought it just like this. And so I'm just using it. It's going to add a little extra protein to the dish rather than so much extra fat and sugar. And that protein is going to help us absorb the sugar within the dessert a little slower. So it's not going to spike our blood sugar as much. So it's going to help us maintain that steady energy, but still get that nice creaminess that we want. So let's see. I think the strawberries would be nice first. So get that nice color. I'll do a little, just spoonful of fresh strawberries right on top. And a little dollop of our Greek yogurt. If you want to get really fancy, you could get one of those mint leaves we had earlier and just stick it right on top for some greenery. All right, so our dessert's ready. That's all it took. So we'll come back over here. I'm going to check underneath my patties. I see they're getting a little cooked. I really do want those to have another minute. So I'm going to start plating. And then that way we can just put the fresh hot salmon cakes right on top. Wow. So for this, very easy. We have our beautiful salad here, and this has got everything that we need other than that protein. We've got our whole grains, we've got our vegetables, we've got all this flavor in here to use as a base.
While you're plating, there's a question that someone had earlier asking, and I'll go ahead and put it on the screen too. She asked, says, hello, Chef Clara. I'd like to begin investing in quality knives. What would you recommend as my first purchase? Now, I know that we can't promote any kind of particular knives or name brand, but she's looking for a multi-purpose style. Is there a style of knife, something that you could recommend?
Yes, absolutely. There's a few different ones, and it's definitely based on your preferred style. So I will grab a couple common ones here. One of the most common, probably the one I use the most, is an 8-inch chef's knife. So it tends to have this curve to it. It's long enough to do just about any job you need, but not too long. And it has that rock, so it makes it really easy. The curve, it makes it easy to rock. So I love that one. I am currently using what's called a Santoku knife. It's a shorter version, so it's about maybe 6 inches long. It's a little easier to maneuver, and if you're not cutting anything big or bulky, it works great. So for all my herbs and things, it's perfect. And then a lot of people love these. So a serrated utility knife. Most new cooks that I talk to, this is their favorite utensil. It's because it's serrated, it's sharp enough to cut through tomatoes or anything you might need. It's small enough to not feel overwhelming, and you can do just about anything with it. So those 3 knives I would recommend. You can also get a paring knife that looks like a chef's knife, but it's about this big, so for really small work. I would say those are the most common, but it definitely depends on what you're cooking and how comfortable you are, which knives you like better. So I would look into some of those. And then the last thing I'm doing here, I have my nice finished salmon cakes. I'm just going to plate those right on top. It fell a little bit, so I'm going to take this and just stack it on there. So we have that nice layered look of the salmon cake right on that faro. Our dessert ready to go. We'll have some water maybe or some unsweet tea here in the South to the side. And you have yourself a lovely spring Easter dinner. Are there any other questions?
That looks beautiful. Let me see if there were any others. We said this substitution. I had one. You said the cardamom. Is that, you said it doesn't taste like cinnamon, but somebody could, it just be a surprise and kind of light. Yes. But you said do it very lightly, right?
Yes, much more light than you would do cinnamon, at least by a quarter. So for this, I literally just put a pinch in there. It's just a stronger spice. It's if you've ever had chai, that's how I like to describe it. So cardamom is one of the main ingredients in Indian chai, like the beverage. So it's that really savory but sweet, very, very flavorful. But yes, you don't need to use as much as you would cinnamon, but it is often found along with cinnamon. So you'll see it in desserts or chais or things like that in combination with cinnamon. They go great together. So sometimes when I'm baking, I'll put them both together. But for this, I just wanted a little something of surprise in the dish.
And I wanted to keep you on big, not me. Now, so let me ask you this too. You also mentioned with the dessert that the protein helps keep the blood sugar from spiking. So if someone wanted to just have a dessert, mid-afternoon, or you're doing a dessert later after, sometime after you've had protein, that's probably a good thing, is to try to put a little protein with a dessert then, is what it sounded like,
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Anytime you are going to have one of those nice sweets that we love, it is great if you can have a little protein and or fiber with it. Both of these are going to slow down your digestion, and so it's going to help your body slowly absorb the sugar and maintain energy from it, rather than uptaking it all at once and you have that sugar crash that we are all trying to avoid. So.
Great. And then you mentioned the knives, and it was the last session that we did that you talked a lot about knives, and we had lots of pictures. So anybody, if you want to watch any of the other episodes that we did, they are all on the AARP Alabama Facebook page and AARP Alabama's YouTube page. You can go back and rewatch those anytime, but she really went over a lot of the knives and the knife skills. So if you want to go check those out, you can. And please, now, everybody stick around. We're going to show you a video clip of upcoming events, because we have several events coming up. And thank you so much, Clara and Mim. You have disappeared, but thank you too for coming on.
There you are. For having us.
Oh, we have loved this. Thank you. This has been a really great series, and we have enjoyed it. The information has just been invaluable. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.